Sophie Cunningham isn't just another name on a roster. She's a spark plug, a wild card. Whether you love her or can't stand her, you can't ignore her. Around the league, players talk. Coaches talk. Even opponents who clash with her can't help but admit she leaves a mark. From teammates praising her energy to rivals questioning her style, Sophie has become one of the most talked about players in the WNBA. When you actually listen to what they're saying, it paints a picture of a player who brings fire every time she steps on the floor. There's a moment in every game when the air shifts. The crowd goes from a hum to a buzz. Hands get a little heavier on screens. Voices get louder on switches. And suddenly, every possession feels like it might tilt the night. That's the space Sophie lives in. Not the quiet stretch of basketball, but the stretch where something is about to happen. Ask around, and you'll hear two stories at once. To some, she's an X factor who lifts a bench into a weapon. To others, she's a handful who drags you into the deep end and keeps you there. Either way, the temperature rises when she checks in. And if a game gets muddy, good. She prefers it that way. There's a certain kind of player who shows up and tilts the game without needing a play called for them. They step on the floor and the temperature jumps a few degrees. The pace shifts. Possessions feel busier, louder, more contested. For Indiana, that moment often arrives when Cunningham checks in, because that's where the wild card lives. You can measure points, rebounds, assists, but how do you score sheer presence? How do you capture pressure, constant activity? Chasing, tagging, rotating, communicating, until the other team finally blinks. Think about all the small, annoying, winning things that never make the broadcast highlight. Stunning toward a driver just long enough to force a kick. Top-blocking a shooter, so the pin down becomes a wrestling match. Veering onto a roll to save a switch. Bodying up on the nail, then still beating your check to corner on the kick-out. It's not glamorous. It is exhausting. And it's the exact stuff that flips a 6-0 run before it starts. Kelsey Mitchell didn't bother dressing it up. She just named it. Sophie's that wild card, man. Her and Lexi together. I think their energy, when I talk about effort defensively and just figuring it out and having a willingness, that's Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hall. They do an unbelievable job of just being present. Being where you need to, being where they need to be. That's a primary scorer telling you the bench's identity. Wild card isn't random. It's the swing variable. The thing that can change a run, flip a quarter, or break a stalemate. And notice where Kelsey goes first. Defense, effort, the willingness to figure out. Translation. Sophie's value isn't just a made shot. It's the 10 little moments before anyone even thinks about shooting. The quick tag and recover. The second box out that prevents a back tap. The early communication that saves a teammate from a late rotation. And the Lexi Hull piece matters. As a duo, they cover ground, talk early, and turn average actions into contested problems. Hull can chase and shoot. Sophie can scream, slip, ghost, crash, and still bother the best wing for a full possession. Together, they're a tempo change. When your starting guard is vouching for your presence, you're not a passenger, you're a lever, and Sophie keeps pulling it. But a label from a teammate is one thing. When the same message echoes from the top, that's different. There's been a lot of buzz lately. Sophie Cunningham's been everywhere. Lighting it up on the court, stealing cameras off it, and turning heads every step of the way. The league loves her fire. The fans love her swagger. And yeah, even Caitlin Clark couldn't help but notice. But instead of feeding the drama or dodging comparisons, Caitlin finally chimed in with a smile, a little laugh, and a line that had everyone talking. If someone had Sophie's looks in my game, that'd be the most famous player this league's ever seen. The room laughed, but Caitlin wasn't just throwing jokes around. There was a spark of respect behind the words, because what people didn't see was a growing bond between her and Sophie. On the court, they go at it. Off the court, there's a connection that's starting to turn heads just as much as their game. And trust me, that quote wasn't the only thing around Caitlin and Sophie. Stay to the end. It gets even better. Teammate praise is earned in sweat, but playing time is paid out by the person holding the rotation. When a scorer calls it a wild card, that's trust. When the head coach echoes it, publicly. That's infrastructure. Roles stop being ideas and start being minutes. If players set the tone, coaches set the terms. So listen to how the person with the clipboard frames her value. Every league has its grammar. The little phrases coaches use that mean more than they sound. Embracing your role, competing at high level. You hear them in pressers, and if you watch long enough, you know exactly what they really mean. In Sophie's case, those words carry a specific praise. She does the hard things on purpose. She volunteers for the work most people hope to avoid. Coach Nate Tibbetts put it this way, which I think when you come in this league from, again, I'm learning this league as a second round pick. You got to have some toughness and grit to you. And, she's embraced that role. And that's worked for them. And so I give Sophie credit, because she competes at a high level. It's unvarnished. No highlight adjectives. Just the coaching version of a nod and a stamp. Toughness, grit, embrace, competes. The second round edge shows up in ways she runs into screens instead of around them, sprints to close a window that might never open, and does it again the very next trip. There's a cost to that style. Bruises, whistles, annoyed opponents. And there's a payoff. Coaches don't hand out bankable minutes lightly. Sophie earns them. Think about what embracing that role actually is in practice. It's showing up to film and calling your own mistakes out first. It's setting the hit on a DHO, so your guard actually turns a corner with a shoulder lead. It's being the low man even when you're tired, tagging the roller, and still contesting corner 3 because your stunt bought your teammate time. It's also the hockey assist mentality. Making the pass that creates the shot. If the starting 5 is the face of the team, players like Sophie are the spine, and spines decide posture. If you want to know how that trust lands on the court, listen to the coach who has to mix and match lineups in real time. Belief is the seed. Deployment is the garden. Toughness and grit sound great in a presser, but what do they let you do on a Tuesday night in the third quarter? That's where the head coach reveals the blueprint. Who guard a position, who unlocks switch packages, who raises a room just by talking. We've heard the stamp, now see the system. The beauty of a player like Sophie is not that she does one thing brilliantly. It's that she lets you do 5 things you couldn't do before. Slide her up a position for size. Switch more actions. Add a little edge to a group that needs teeth. Her energy is the battery. Her voice is the metronome. And the coach can feel it from the sideline to the huddle. Stephanie White didn't mince words. Oh my God, Sophie's a dog. She just is. She's a competitor. She's versatile. So she allows us to do different things. Like, she plays with such a toughness. She's huge, and she's going to be for us all season long. But what she brings from an energy standpoint, she raises the level of play of everybody around her as soon as she steps foot on the floor. Hell, even on the sideline. Her communication, everything. She's definitely an X factor. Dog and X factor. Those aren't compliments you give out for showing up. They're signals that your presence changes the game. Versatility means a coach can steal rest for a starter without sacrificing identity. Communication means everyone is a half step earlier than before. And raises the level is the thing you can't teach. Other players try harder when you're on the floor. That's leadership without a speech. That's value that leaks into every possession. In one stint, Sophie can be the weak side cutter, the flare screen setter, the ghost on a pick and pop, and the nail help on the next trip, all in 2 minutes a clock. That modularity lets a coach shapeshift. If the opponent is small, you punish on the glass. If they're big, you run them until the paint thins out. Add her sideline communication, pointing, calling coverage, tapping a chest after a switch, and you get something rarer than a hot shooting night. A group that is connected. Of course, playing with force and voice is only half the equation. The other half, the league reacts. Some clap back, some clap along, and some refuse to get dragged into anything that isn't the ball. So, the edge is real and it travels, But what happens when that edge collides with Phenom, who treats chaos like background noise? That's not a scuffle. That's a test. Energy meets poise. Contact meets calm. And the game asks a different question. Can you bother someone who refuses to blink? Cue the rookie who answers storms by shrinking them. A good rivalry needs sparks. A quote, a shove, a whistle that turns a game into a conversation. Sophie's name tends to find its way into those conversations because she plays in the heat. And when Sophie questioned the whistle for a rising star, the response that came back was ice water. Cold, calm, and controlled. Paige Buchers didn't escalate. She reframed. Yeah. A great thing about this world is everybody's entitled to their own unique and, personal opinions. So that's really, and I can't control things. I can't control the whistle. But what I can control is, just being more unaffected by it. I'm affected by the whistle. It would not pay attention to the reference. That's veteran composure from a rookie. Paige doesn't deny the noise. She shrinks it. Unaffected is the key. Unaffected by personality. Unaffected by whistle. It's also a perfect mirror for why Sophie is polarizing. Her game is designed to affect you, to make you feel her, feel the contact, feel the chase, feel the cumulative pressure. If Paige is going to be the player who doesn't flinch, Sophie's going to be the one trying to make you blink. And there's a second layer here, the marketing spotlight versus the locker room grind. Spotlight players get the magazine covers. Grind players decide the mood. When those worlds bump into each other, you get friction. Sometimes it's tactical. Sometimes it's philosophical. Either way, it's compelling. And inside the same league, there's another kind of reaction, one that draws a boundary around the conversation before it even starts. There are two ways to manage noise: absorb it or block it at the door. Paige chose absorption. Center the ball, star the distraction. Some veterans pick the other lane entirely. They set a boundary in real time and protect the room before it frays. That's culture work, and it's loud on purpose. Sometimes the loudest message is protective. It's not a stat or a scouting note. It's a culture play. There's a line between debate and disrespect, and the players will tell you where it is. That's why, when a live chat tilted negative during All-Star Weekend, Courtney Williams shut the door and threw the bolt. Anybody say anything in the chat about Sophie? Going timeout. On my mod, if anybody got anything to say about Sophie in a negative way, put their ass in timeout. Straight up, we not playing that. We is not playing that. Negative energy. No negative energy. That's more than vibes. That's a signal from a respected guard. This is still fraternity, and we don't tear down active peers in our own house. It says two things at once. 1, Sophie has allies in the room. 2, the room has rules. Ain't nothing but love reads like a motto, but it's also strategy. Tension is inevitable in a league this competitive. Containment is intentional. And the message is clear. We can battle on the court without building bonfires online. This is also how reputations get a second dimension. You can be the player who irritates opponents and still be someone your peers protect publicly. That blend, edge on the floor, cover off it, makes you sustainable over a long season. Nobody survives a super long marathon sprint without friends and a good support system. Sophie has them. Of course, a lot of this stems from heat of the moment plays, the kind that blur together when you frame by frame them and still can't agree, which is why first-person reactions matter. They remind you where the line felt like in real time. Off the court, the line is about respect. On the court, the line is survival. You can tweet principles. You have to live with possessions. And in the split-second world of screens, grabs, and collisions, the code is simpler than any statement. Don't get punked. No hashtags. No think pieces. Just the raw calculus of contact. Hear it from someone who saw it live. The clips come fast. Angles, elbows, bodies crashing into space that doesn't really exist. Sometimes, there's no elegant explanation beyond what everybody saw. And when Natisha Heedman described one of those flashpoints, she didn't dance around it. She said the quiet part out loud, and the loud part even louder. You cannot let yourself get punked. Oh, there she go. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you. That girl grabbed her by the neck. I ain't gonna lie. He showed it not wrong. Bro, you can't get punked, bro. She had to get up. Like, you can't get punked. Two truths living side by side. Yes, she grabbed. And no, you can't accept that without a response. That's the gray zone where Sophie lives, and where a lot of role definers live in a league that values toughness as currency. It's messy. It's human. It's also the exact space that forges reputations. You can't get punked is both a rule and a dare. If you opt into that code, expect pushback. Sophie expects it. She plays through it. Zoom out and think about the chain reaction. A hard foul wakes up a bench. A bench wakes up a crowd. A crowd wakes up a defense. And suddenly, the other team is seeing two defenders where there's one, because the communication is now louder than the set. In those swings, whistle calibration matters. Officials talk in huddles. Coaches check matchups. Players decide whether they'll escalate or de-escalate. The sequence doesn't just change the scoreboard. It changes who you are for the rest of the night. And then there's the bigger, broader current. Players bringing the rest of their lives into the room. It's not always about a hard foul or a stray word. Sometimes the stakes they're talking about are much heavier. Moments like that don't happen in a vacuum. They sit on top of everything else players carry into the building. Some nights, you feel the game and nothing else. Other nights, the world leaks through the tunnel. That's why tempers flare and words linger, because the stakes aren't all basketball. To understand the temperature, zoom out to the thermostat behind it. Sophie's lane is basketball. She shows up, takes the heat, and does the unglamorous work that protects stars and tilts games. That's not a hashtag or a press conference. That's screen set, bodies absorbed, rotations covered. You can disagree with her style, but you can't miss the intent. Keep the main thing. And inside a locker room, intent matters more than anything you post after. Natasha Cloud's words aren't about a ball screen or a box out. They're about politics and litmus tests. That's her right. But judging others through a ballot turns a sport into a purity exam, not a basketball project. Sophie isn't asking who you voted for. She's asking if you'll sprint to the nail, talk in coverage, and take the hit so your scorer doesn't have to. One approach builds cohesion around the job. The other dares people to pick sides about everything except the game. I try to have open dialogue. I try to have hard dialogue with her. And it is what it is. Who you vote for this election, we're going to see. But if my life depends on it, and if that don't matter to you, you can't tell someone you love them and then vote against their life. That's heavy. But here's the problem. The season doesn't wait for debates to get resolved. Possessions arrive every 24 seconds. Sophie gives you something you can use right now. Edge, cover, accountability, without a politics prerequisite. If you want proof of what the room values, listen to the only verdict that counts in that moment. That's not ideology, that's gratitude. It tells you exactly whose actions traveled and whose message landed when the game was loudest. Which brings us to the one reaction that recolors everything else. Context matters because it sharpens the next moment. After the noise, after the boundaries, after the code and the cause, the room needed clarity from the only voice that could settle it. Not a paragraph, a single word. That's how stars talk when everyone's already heard enough. The kind of word that relabels a role and rewrites a night. In every locker room, there are words that hang in the air long after they're spoken, not because they're loud, but because they validate something everyone felt in the moment. You can argue a whistle or a replay. You can't argue relief. And when Sophie described the exchange that followed the most controversial moment of Indiana's season, one word stood out. It's the word that turns agitator into ally. But in the locker room, I think she was like, finally, finally, someone else. I was like, dude, I got you. That's it. That's the thesis. Finally, someone else. If you've watched the season, you don't need a translator. Caitlin Clark gets bodied, bumped, baited, and blasted with attention every single night. When someone steps into the storm willingly, absorbing the whistle, the boos, the discourse, of course the franchise player feels it. Of course it lands like protection. It doesn't forgive every foul or sanitize every scuffle. It reframes the intention behind them. Not recklessness, but cover. Not chaos, but I got you. And here's the part opponents feel, even if they'll never admit it. When your star says finally, the rest of the room hears permission. Permission to bring more edge. Permission to stand taller. Permission to become the version of your team that can handle anything. So where does that leave Sophie? Exactly where players and coaches have been placing her all along. Finally is more than relief. It's an assignment. It turns edge into cover and a lightning rod into a shield. From that point on, every bump, screen, and rotation reads differently. Less random heat, more deliberate protection. That's the moment teammates expand, opponents recalibrate, and coaches double down. The job from here is simple. Set the temperature,